Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on Bitrix automations. I'm Johannika from Fullview Solutions, Bitrix24 Gold Partner in South Africa. Let's do some background before we jump into the practical. So I've done some preparation for us to look at almost like the theory. So we'll look at what is automations, why we use automations, and then just simple everyday automation examples. And then, very important, what's the difference between rules and triggers? Took me a while to understand that, and then jump into Bitrix for the how to. So, I tried to get a very good definition of what is automations. And the one I got that I really like is letting the systems do repetitive tasks for you so humans can focus on customers. Let it send those reminders, let it send the automatic emails. Then we can have the conversations and consulting with the customers that I want to say the robots can't do. So the question is, why use automations? A lot of people are steering away from it, so I don't want to use it. So it's not really AI, but it makes our lives easier. So one of the main things is it saves us time. So we're all busy running all over with different things we're doing, and it saves us time. It reduces the admin. Um, I don't like admin, but it's part of my job. So it helps you to reduce that, and it prevents mistakes, especially when we look at the email templates. We can look at that. It improves response time if we let the automations do the responding immediately instead of the people waiting for us to get into the detail. And then it helps a small team to operate like a big one. For example, again, the responses. If you don't have a whole big team sitting at watching a mailbox, the responses can help you with that. And then consistency. Um, Once again, using emails, we'll look at the example of that. You don't have to copy and paste or type an email every time. It knows this is the template that has to be used. So when we're working in Bitrix, we can also look at these examples, but it's important to keep it easy. It's very easy to make it very complex, and then it's so difficult to maintain it. So make sure you start with the small ones to keep it easy. And then a few of the examples that we look at is the auto response on a new lead, automatic renaming of leads or deals, creating internal reminders, and sending customer reminders. Those are basic examples of making that admin easier. And then another thing that we'll look at is the difference between a rule and a trigger. Um, so it took me a while to figure that out, but just a summary is an automation rule is things that the system does, and triggers is things that the system responds to. When we look at it in Bitrix, it will be a good example for you to see, because mostly we just use automation rules, but triggers are also a very powerful automation part that we can actually do. So that's just some background on automations. So let's jump into Bitrix and see how we do that and where we find the automation settings. Let's go to Bitrix. So I've set up a demo environment for us just to look at the examples. And the first question is, where do you find automations? In Bitrix, there's quite a few ways to find the same item. But the easiest way is if you are on your Kanban view, which is your view with your different columns and cards, there is a menu item that says automation rules. If I click on automation rules, it now has the rules per stage. So that's the important thing to remember. There's a whole different part that we can work with, that's business processes. But for automations, it's triggered by a stage. So when a card lands in this stage, that specific automation will be triggered. Same with any of your other stages. And it's important when you set it up to name the automation to tell you what it's doing. Right, so let's go back out and look at the leads that we have here. So as you can see, they are all named by the person's first name and last name, and then the product that they require. So for this, it's a little small business that delivers platters or drinks or whatever. That's just the example of the business we are using. We like to set this up for customers by default because starting with lead hashtag 1572 gets a bit difficult to know who the inquiry is for when you are on your Kanban view. So let's look at how I do that automation. First, where do we go? Automation rules. And then we can create a rule by clicking on add. So if I click on that, there is a lot of options on the type of automations that you're going to do. So for today, we can focus on 3 types: on modifying the item that you have, sending an email, and sending a reminder. Those are the 3 types of automations that we'll be looking at. So on the top over here, you can search for the automation that you want to work with. And then you need to remember to switch between automation rules and triggers just to make the options that pops up to make it a bit less. So if I go to automation rules, and then you can see, for instance, there it is already modify the item. So it's terminology that you need to get used to in terms of what it does, but modify is what I'm going to use. So I want to rebuild the automation that renames the lead. I select modify item. Then it pops up with quite a few options of things that I can do in the automation. The first one is in parallel or wait. When would you use that? If I have more than one automation that one needs to run after the other, you will use the wait. If it all needs to happen at the same time, I will use the parallel. What's an example? If I need to rename the lead first and then send an internal notification to remember to follow up with the lead. So if I do it both at the same time, your notification will say, remember to follow up with the lead hashtag blah, blah. You don't really know what it is. But when I tick wait, it runs one after the other. So I can first rename the lead and then send the notification with the new name that I've populated. So that's in parallel and wait. And then immediately, or you can pause it. So the lead renaming is a good example of, I want that to happen immediately when the lead is created. Or I can say, pause it for 5 minutes and then send a reminder to the agent or whoever's dealing with it to remember to follow up. And you can set it in minutes, hours, you can set it based on the current time, based on date fields that you have in your leads. For now, I'm going to leave this to happen automatically. We can add conditions. So when we look at the email sending, we'll go into the conditions part. So I'm just going to skip over this now. But then I need to select what field do I want to change. I've selected modify item. So I need to tell Bitrix, what am I modifying? By default, it will always pop up with lead name. If you want to modify anything else, like maybe adding a comment in the comments field, you can delete this field and then select a new one, any of your fields in your leads. So if I do comments, I can automatically add a comment there, whichever it would want to be. So for our example, we're sticking with lead name. And then you see these 3 dots on the side. This is fetch information from my lead and use it to modify the specific item. So I like to use, that's my personal preference, the person's name and last name. If it's a company, you can use the company name and then what product they are interested in. If I click on my three dots over here, you've got all the fields available for leads and even responsible person. You can search. So I want to say, I want to add the person's first name. So I search for name. There's the lead name. I can add their last name. I go to my three dots again and I can search for name again, and then I can have last name. So with what I have over here, it will modify the lead name using those two fields. But then I can add over here and say, I also want to know what is the product that they are interested in. So it's easy for me to see it on my lead card. I go back to my three dots and I can type product interested in. I'm using the specific food one. What's very important is whenever you see an option like this means you are using a list field. And a list field, that's a bit of a technical thing. Each of those options actually has a number in the back. If you're going to use this, it will say dash 468 or whatever that ID is of the field option. Always remember with lists, you have to pick text if you want to auto populate something. So I'm going to tick text. And to make it a bit different than the one that's already there, I'm going to add the field that says the date of the inquiry. So I can search date and then I can say start date. This is when this was logged. Okay. Let me just pick another field there for us. Let's say created on and save. Once you've saved this card, you need to remember to save again at the bottom. Okay. Now this is where before I save, please rename this card. Else now you can see I've got two cards over there. I don't know what is this one doing because I've renamed this one. So I'm going to add that and say rename with date. Right. If you remember what we just spoke about parallel or afterwards, I'm going to have a bit of a mess over here at the moment because the one rule's going to run and name it the one way, and then the other rule's going to run and name it a different way. I'm just going to move this automation to another stage, or what I can do is I can deactivate it. There's a very faded item here at the bottom that says actions. So I'm going to disable this rule for now while I'm testing. So we've set up our rule, we've renamed it, we know that's going to happen automatically in the beginning. Now I'm going to save. So let's create a test lead and then we can test our automation. So I'm creating a test lead. And let's use my details just as an example. It's warning me that there's already an item, the duplicate control. And then I can use, let's say, let's just use my demo layout over here. I can say the food type or whatever they would want to request. So let's say food product interest. So I'm picking over here fruit platter because that's what they're interested in. And then the Bitrix already makes a date stamp of when it was created, does that automatically. So I'm creating my lead with the required information, and then, oh, I didn't add the first name. So that's why that is blank. But this is a good example also. If you made a mistake like I just did, you can rerun the automation. So I'm going to add my name over here, save, and then close it. And then if I'm on my list view, we can look at that just now. I can rerun the automation. So let's open this. And remember, automations runs on stage. So if I manually just want to say I want to run this automation again, I can move it to another stage and move it back for that automation to run. I'm just going to refresh this for us. Okay, then the automation, what it will do is will actually add my name over here. So that's renaming an item. Remember to pick the options if it's immediately or if it has to wait. Let's look at another example where I can send the customer an email automatically. So what I've done for us is I've set up a stage over here that says send price list. I always tell when we do implementations, this naming of your stages is very important because I need to know, did it happen or should the system now trigger something? Else you don't know what's happening on that stage. Like this one where I say first contact completed, it's something I did, so I move it there. If I wanted to send an email automatically, I can name the stage to say when I move it here, send the price list automatically. So let's look at the automation that we built there to send an email. Once again, I go to automation rules, and then I look at the card that needs to do that action. I've set it up already for us so we don't have to do all the typing. So I added a condition over here. So that's the one thing we can also look at, that if the product they want is a sandwich platter, then send the sandwich platter email. I can change this to say, if the product they selected is fruit platter, I can add a different content to my email, then it will send the fruit platter email. So you can build those different cards, and that's where it helps with the admin and keeping things consistent, because you know you're always sending this. And if the price changes, you can come and change it on this template, and you know they will always receive that. I'm going to change this back to sandwich. And then the same rule applies that we did when we renamed the lead. Our three dots on the side allows us to fetch information from the lead. So I can pick anything over here. I've got the lead name. I've got, if I want date, I can have delivery date of when do they want the platter to be delivered. I can use that. Any of the fields that I have on the right, I can auto-populate. And this is where it makes it personal, right? So it will populate the name, and I can even populate at the bottom the responsible person of this lead. Once again, makes it personal. It doesn't just say Bob's Food Services, it gives it a name of a person that you're dealing with. So let us save this and save again. Always remember to save again at the bottom. Let's test this automation. I have Jack's fruit platter interest. Okay. So if I see the product over here is platter, if I move it to send price list, it shouldn't send the price list because I've picked fruit platter. Let's test one that should send the email. So if I take something like, let's take the sandwich platter and just move it back. If I pick sandwich platter and I move it to the stage where I've set up my automation, it should send that email. I'm taking the card, I'm moving it to this stage where I've named it to say, do this action, send the price list for sandwiches. We can open up the lead and we can look at the history and see, did that action actually happen? And here you can see it's a timestamp, it is now. And it sent that email in a personalized way. There's my template that I've added. There's the person's name that I added, and then the responsible person. So if we go back to the lead, you will see that Clara is the responsible person for this lead. So it made it very personal to say who it's from, and you can add phone numbers and emails, whatever additional information you would want to add. So that's an example of sending an email to the customer. Let's look at an example where I'm reminding a staff member to do something, and that's where we'll use the time delays. I'm closing this, and then I'm going back to automation. So what do we want to achieve? We want to say if there's a new inquiry that came in, and you have contacted them, but nothing happened. They didn't book something or you didn't send them the price list. We can set up a reminder for admin or sales to say, remember to follow up with this customer. Let's look at that. I'm adding an automation. I'm checking that it's for automation rules. And then what I can do is I can search for the action that sent a message. It's important to read what the action's doing. Don't read only the heading, read the subtitle, if I can call it that, to see what is this action actually doing. So we want to send a message from a specified employee to a employee. I'm adding that. Let's do that. So now I want to say, okay, I'm sending it to oh, sorry, that's my bad. I picked the wrong one. I want to add that one, send it directly. So I'm saying who is sending it? Who am I sending it to? In this case, it is the responsible person for this lead because I want to remind them to do something. And then I can add a message. Remember to follow up. And now this is the part where I mentioned where I like it to rename a lead, because now if I tell them, remember to follow up on this lead, and I type name, they will know it's for this specific lead, not just lead hashtag 1276. That's my message over there. And then if you remember, we looked at time. So what I'm going to tell Bitrix is if this lead has been in this stage for, let's say, 4 hours, and nobody has responded or sent a price list to the customer, then only it should run. I'm going to set it to 10 minutes, which is the minimum that you can use in Bitrix. So while we're gonna look at the next features, we will get that reminder to pop up. So I'm doing that. It's going to wait 10 minutes. And then again, if I had to add this here below the renaming, I would have to add wait for the first one to be finished. I'm saving this. Remember, I need to rename. So I'll say reminder to employee. That's what's happening over there. Saving this. So now we've looked at 3 examples. Renaming anything in the lead, sending an email automatically to the customer, and sending a reminder internally for somebody to remember to do something. So that's just basic examples of automations. Let's look at triggers. So where the system needs to react on something that happened. And the most common example that I like to use is when a form from your website or wherever was submitted. If we look at how these lead stages are named, there's a new inquiry, cold calling, so you need to contact the customers. You've completed the first contact. And then I have web form inquiry, so they contacted you. I can set up a trigger so when a lead comes in, automatically move it to that stage. Let's look at our automation rules. We're looking at the stage that we want this to happen in. So if a trigger is triggered, it will move to that specific stage where you have set up the trigger. I'm going to switch to triggers, and then I'm going to search for form. Now you've got different options. I'm going to select this one that says track form submissions. The moment a form is completed, move it to that stage. Selecting this, and then I need to tell Bitrix which form. So as this is our demo portal, you'll see there's quite a lot of forms. I'm going to use the one that says food orders. And I'm not adding any conditions. I want it to always happen no matter what, and save. So for us to look at this example, I've already opened up a form for us for food orders. I can add my details over here, pick my product interest. So we're going to get a punch. When do I want it? On the 28th. And I'm going to say no mint. I don't like mint. So I'm submitting my form. When I submit this, what needs to happen? It should come in as a lead, but move to my stage submitted. It shouldn't stay in the new stage. Let's go. Can you see there's my notification that came in about the form that was submitted, and I can refresh over here. And then let's just look at in progress. Oh, I know what I did is I've got a duplicate lead. I've already got one for my name. Let's do another example. So I'll do Peter Smithers. I'm not going to add that now. Let's do milkshakes, delivery date the 29th, and I am going to submit. Here's my notification of my new lead, and it came into that stage immediately because that's what my trigger said. That's an example of a trigger that needs to happen on a specific action. You can have a look at all the triggers available. It's very valuable to use that. Pitfalls. What you shouldn't do is don't have too many automations waiting for a long time, because then it can kind of like clog up your automations because you've got so many things running, waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting that you don't know what's going to be actioned when. A reminder, remember to rename your automations to show you what it does. Over here, I click on my pencil, on my editing, it is actually a pencil, and say what it's doing. And remember, if you have one running after the other, you can say, should it wait or should it run immediately? I don't know if you have any questions. You're welcome to pop it in the chat, and the team's also online and they can help you to answer that. So I'm going to just recap while you guys are typing to say why we're using automations and the types that we can use. So we use it that the robots or the computers automations can do the repetitive tasks that we can do the human interaction. You can do reminders, you can send automatic communication for acknowledgements, or you can set up triggers for when an external activity happened and you want the system to respond to that. If you have any other questions, you're welcome to pop us an email to support@fullviewsolutions.co.za, or you can go to our website and submit a contact inquiry form. Thank you very much for joining. Have a nice day.